This is the sermon for August 13th, 2023. And baby, my cockatoo will quiet down in a little bit. I've got him covered up. All right, so this is entitled Joseph the Favorite, because he was the favorite of all the sons in Jacob's family. So I'm going to read from Genesis 37, 1 to 4, and 12 through 28. Meanwhile, Jacob had settled down where his father had lived, the land of Canaan. This is the story of Jacob. The story continues with Joseph, 17 years old at the time, helping out his brothers in herding the flocks. And Joseph brought his father bad reports on them, on his brothers. That's Jacob. Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because Joseph was the child of his old age. And Jacob made Joseph an elaborately embroidered coat. When his brothers realized that their father loved him more than them, they grew to hate him. They wouldn't even speak to him. Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are with the flocks in Shechem. Come, I want to send you to them. Bring me back a report." Joseph said, "I'm ready." The brothers spotted Joseph off in the distance. By the time he got to them, they had cooked up a plot to kill him. The brothers were saying, "Here comes that dreamer. Let's kill him and throw him into one of these old cisterns. We can say that a vicious animal ate him up. We'll see what his dreams amount to." Reuben heard the brothers talking and intervened to save him. "We're not going to kill him. No murder. Go ahead and throw him in the cistern out here in the wild, but don't hurt him." Reuben planned to go back later and get him out and take him back to his father. When Joseph reached his brothers, they ripped off the fancy coat he was wearing, grabbed him, and threw him into a dry cistern. Then they sat down to eat their supper. Looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites on their way from Gilead, their camels loaded with spices, ointments, and perfumes to sell in Egypt. Judah said, "Brothers, what are we going to get out of killing our brother and concealing the evidence? Let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let's not kill him. He is, after all, our brother." His brothers agreed. By that time, the Midianite traders were passing by. His brothers pulled Joseph out of the cistern and sold him for 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took Joseph with them down to Egypt. And then I'm going to read from Psalm 85, verses 10 through 12. Love and truth meet in the street. Right living and whole living embrace and kiss. Truth sprouts green from the ground. Right living pours down from the skies. Oh yes, God gives goodness and beauty. Our land responds with bounty and blessing. Right living strides out before God and clears a path for the divine. All right, so I don't know how many of you have seen the musical Joseph. I think it was called Joseph. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. That's the name of it. I was lucky enough to have seen that show live in Chicago, and I'm pretty sure we saw it with Donny Osmond, and it is delightful, and I think you can see a video of it. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's fun. There's laughter, there's fun, upbeat music, and some heartfelt songs as well. But yes, it tells the Bible story of Jacob, the dad, who later was named Israel, same man, and the many, many brothers, and then Joseph. So, Yeah, it's just delightful, delightful musical. So it deals with the idea, though, that Joseph, being the favorite child of Jacob, the patriarch, was unfair. And the older brothers, uh, all the brothers that were born of the maidservants. So Jacob, I, he married the maidservants first, and then he had Rachel as his wife. And Rachel was a younger woman, and Joseph was the baby, the child of Jacob's old age. So, but Joseph was the favorite child, signified by the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, or the elaborately beautiful embroidered coat. And I used to complain to my mother, life is not fair. It's not fair. How many of us have had kids who have complained, but it's not fair? And my mom used to take me in her lap and she'd say, oh, honey, whoever said life was fair? Because it isn't. And that's something I remember clearly about my mom. It's a wisdom gem, and it's true. I could complain bitterly that my life wasn't fair because my mom died when I was 20. But I also know women who have struggled because their mothers were not kind. And so life wasn't fair for them. I didn't have a mother past the age of 20, but they didn't have a kind mother. And my mother, her parents were kind of cold and distant. They weren't warm parents at all. So everyone has something to complain about, and life isn't fair. And so, yeah. Well, there's a writer this week who helped me see that the story of Joseph and helped me see the story of Joseph and his brothers in a new way that I hadn't thought about before. So I always thought of the story as a more two-dimensional story, a story like a cartoon. Cartoon books that are graphic novels, I think they're called, or the idea of a superhero movie. Very simplistic. There's good and there's evil. Often they aren't told in shaded ways, many different ways of looking at it. So, yeah, good and evil. When people tell a story of good and evil, watch out, because what they're telling often is that they are good and those others, whoever the other is, are evil. And so when it's good and evil and I'm good and they're evil, then that is going to end up being life is not fair. And so, yeah, the reality of the world of God is that it is full of ways that life isn't fair and that good and evil are mixed up in everybody. So it's full of shades between black and white and fair and unfair. And no one is all good or all evil. I think when, no matter who it is in history, when we look, we will see a mix of good and evil all wrapped up in the same person. And it's been pointed out that we as Christians are a mix of sinner and saint in every Christian. We are sinner and saint every day, every hour. And I wish that we were all good. I wish I was all good, but I know better. Being a Christian is about growing to be more like Christ and living moment by moment, seeing the good and evil in ourselves and in others. And all we can really do is to become quiet, to become mindful, and to find ways to become more loving moment by moment. So let's look at the story of Joseph and Jacob the dad, who had a favorite child. I've read that parents all have a favorite child. They just try not to show it or admit it. And I don't know if that's true or not. It could be. Anyway, Jacob is the great patriarch of Israel. And his name was changed from Jacob to Israel, which really shows the power of being a patriarch at that time. So Jacob is a father of a whole passel of sons from the maidservants who are his slaves or concubines. And then he has this one precious son from his beloved young wife. And the one precious son is Joseph, who gets a coat of many colors. And Joseph, that brat, wears the coat of many colors everywhere. I imagine he wore it as as a badge of honor of his father's love. And so it's no wonder in our simplistic minds that the older brothers plotted against him. How could anyone be more annoying than Joseph? He has these dreams and he tells the stories of the dreams, which lift him up as the star of the dreams. And so that's the kind of person. So again, is the story told meant to be simplistic? I don't know. The surprise in the story, which is the biblical story, is that Joseph gets sold into slavery and he fails his way to the top. He keeps getting into trouble and he ends up being the right-hand man of the Pharaoh. And he ends up saving Egypt by having his dreams of how they should save from the abundant years and how they can survive the famine. And what happens is that because he knows all this in advance through the dreams, and I would say through common sense, when you have bountiful years, you save, right? So that's what Joseph, that's the wisdom that he had. He was able to save his family. And so he was able to save the people of God through this as well. So when famine stalks the land of Canaan, his family is starving and he's able to save them. So, yeah. And there's a woman, Amy Victoria Adkins Jones, long name. She challenged me to think about the story in a new way, to not think about it in terms of black and white, good and evil, simplistic, but instead to see it in a way where we all see ourselves in Joseph. We all see ourselves in the brothers. The brothers, remember, plotted to kill the younger brother. And then, after he was thrown in the cistern, in the dry cistern, they sat down and ate a meal. And could they hear him screaming for help? You know, it is very black and white, good and evil. And yet we all see ourselves in Joseph, and we all see ourselves in the stories. The brothers plot against him, and Reuben, there's going to be one of those brothers in every group. He says, nope, no murder. We can leave him in there. And then Reuben had a plan to go back later and rescue his brother and take him to his father. Maybe he was looking for points too. But in any case, we see each other in all the characters. So imagine putting Joseph to suffer in an underground tank, a dry tank, yes, but an underground tank, and then sitting down to a meal. And Amy Adkins Jones has said that we do this. We enjoy our relative affluence, and we sit down to an abundant meal, while there are those in our world, even Christian brothers and sisters, who are starving. You know, one of the great things about the Durand Church is that they've helped me become aware of the suffering, the plight of people in Haiti. And it's not just Haiti, it's all kinds of places. I mean, we've all been praying for Ukraine and Russia. And again, that's another situation where people are not all good and evil. There is a mixture of good and evil in everyone, and it helps to see people as fully human in that way. We might not have been the best siblings in the world. We are Christians, and yet we're a mix of good and evil. So how can we become aware is another question. How can we become aware of the mix of good and evil? We are sinners and saints, and the task is to recognize when there's been trauma. So Joseph's brothers, there was a clear favorite, and Joseph's brothers felt they were hated by their father because of the overwhelming love of Joseph. And so instead of healing from what they considered trauma, Instead, they were going to do further harm to Joseph. What's our task? To heal. We may have suffered greatly in our lives, so how do we heal? Instead of continuing the saga of hurting others because we hurt, again, there's mindfulness, there's growing up, there's maturing in Christ, becoming aware, like Amy Adkins Jones says. There's suffering in the world. And how can we heal? And how can we bring healing in our lives, those around us? How can we be more loving in the world toward others? Amen.